Hello, everybody, and welcome back to UBI Conversations. That's Universal Basic Income Conversations with Michael Haynes and Andrea Buck. Welcome back, Michael.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, great. So this is episode 2, as we said, and where we're going to be doing a deep dive into how the UBI is implemented, whereas last week we covered the justifications for a UBI. So I'm going to allow you to do request that you do a recap for us, Michael. But before we do a recap of last week, I'd like to just give a summary of what we're going to be covering today. So in summary, we have the resources to meet everyone's basic needs, and we can afford to pay a UBI to everyone using newly created money, so long as we target the net benefit to those who need it most. First, by treating it as income for welfare, and secondly, by recovering it on a sliding scale from earned income. And we can minimize the risks and demonstrate the benefits by starting small and increasing the amount gradually over 5 years. This will give the supply chain time to adapt to the new pattern of demand without causing shortages that drive inflation. It will also allow us to monitor both good and bad impacts, so we can take action to slow the rate of increase if the bad appears to be outweighing the good, or more likely, speed up to achieve the net benefits. So the timing of this is that we're hoping that this thing gets enacted by Parliament by 2025 and is fully implemented by 2030. That's about it, hey, Michael, what we're going to be covering today.
That's about it today, and I hope to be able to demonstrate that what you have just said actually is feasible and practical. Yeah. And if first, as we said, maybe I just recap on what we spoke about last time we met, in order to give people who are maybe just for the first time seeing this an understanding, and also a refresh for those who did listen in last time. So yeah. I guess the first question is, what is a universal basic income? And it is what it says. It's money for basic needs. It's universal, so for every adult over 18, it is unconditional. It's regular, so it would be paid every week, and it would be paid for life. And the amount of money that we're targeting is an amount above the poverty line, which currently is around $500 a week, and that would be adjusted for inflation. So we discussed then 6 of the 10 justifications for UBI, and I want to run through all of the 10, including the 4 we missed out, just at least touch on them. But the first was to restore our birthright. So over the centuries, our right to live off the land has been whittled away by the creation of property rights and money. And these have been a boon for humanity, in general at least. But now, as a gentleman by the name of Scott Santons, who's been active in the UBI sphere globally for quite some time, he's made a really good point that modern humans are the only species that need money to survive. So a UBI as money will restore our birthright by providing the money that's needed to survive. Second, it will alleviate systemic poverty. That arises because only 50% of the population can work to earn money at any time, and the other 50% get money from savings and family if they're lucky, and welfare if they're not. And the
so yes. Do you mind if I just stop you there for a moment, just to clarify, Michael, that when we talk about 50% not working, that includes kids, doesn't it?
Yes, so that includes, well, if you look at the workforce, there's about 13 million who are in the workforce out of 26 million, and all the rest are the kids, the elderly, the disabled, the unpaid carers, people who are between jobs. So while people are in that group, and it's a constantly changing group, while people are in that group, they get money from savings and family, as I said, if they're lucky, or welfare if they're not. And the problem is that welfare can be a trap, and it happens because you lose benefits when you do paid work. And the higher the benefit, the bigger the trap, because it's quite rational for somebody to say, well, if I'm getting this money as a benefit, I'd rather take that benefit than do this low paid work, right? It's perfectly rational. It's nothing to do with laziness. And that means that benefits have to be kept low so that people who can work are forced to take the available jobs, because that's what we want as a society, and that's fair enough. The trouble is that the design of the system then forces all the people who can't work into poverty, right? And those are mainly single women with kids, aged and disabled, they're unpaid carers, people who are between jobs, and even some working poor who are on really low pay and short hours. And they simply are forced to accept these low benefits because they can't work. And that causes a huge amount of stress and is a major factor in domestic violence.
And is it not also a real problem, because this is it's designed this way and it's designed with a purpose, but it's unspoken. So nobody's saying we are deliberately paying you an amount to keep you below the poverty line so that you're incentivized to work. And oh, we're sorry, there are people who suffer unintentionally. The unintended consequences are these people. So instead of it being overt and outwardly spoken, it creates shame and blame on people who are in poverty.
And no, it's not a small group. It's in Australia, it's over 3 million people. 17% of all of our children live in poverty, right? Now that's an indictment on society. And it's not something that most people recognise, and that it is a system problem, right? It's a matter of both demographics. We have kids and elderly and carers, and also system design. And the UBI, in effect, will fix the system, right? Because it will pay people money unconditionally, and that frees them to earn as much money as they can on top. So if you are a single mum and maybe you can afford a few hours work a week, you get to keep the whole UBI and whatever you earn. So that
to a degree, right, you reach a point where you start paying it back.
Yes, there will be a degree where you have to start paying some of it back, but you're well ahead with the design, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So that's a couple of the reasons why, right? Restore our birthright, alleviate systemic poverty. A third one is to also provide a small amount of recognition for the immense amount of valuable unpaid work that is caring for family, volunteering, building social bonds. So, you know, society can't function without that work. It underpins the paid economy. So it does provide some recognition for that. And in doing so, it also provides a small but significant step in alleviating disadvantage for women, because, as you will well know, women do most of the unpaid work, and they also routinely earn less than men in jobs. And that leaves them more dependent on men and the state for money to survive. And it keeps many, unfortunately, locked in abusive relationships and destitute when they can no longer work. So a UBI will give women some independent means. The fifth reason is similar, in that it will provide a significant step in recognising the subjugation of our First Nations people. And I don't believe that's too strong a word. And though we are not the colonisers, we've got the power today to correct the ongoing harm that has flowed from colonisation. And we can do it by putting money into the hands of our First Nations people without conditions, so that it gives them, as it will everybody, more control of their lives. So, so much of the time we have taken a paternalistic view to our First Nations people, where they have become enculturated to a society of dependence. The sixth reason is it will also provide a small but significant step in recognising the value of learning. So learning, as we know, is some of the hardest and most valuable work that we do. And we pay everyone, the professors and the tutors and even the ground staff at colleges who work to create the product, which is the educated person. Yet we don't pay the one person who does the only work that matters, and that's turning the information into knowledge in their own head. And uniquely, the student is both the worker doing that work of turning information into knowledge, and they are the product, the educated person who is then valuable to society. So where we have a world of exponential change, by paying the student while they are learning, a UBI really helps people to switch back and forth over their life between learning and applying their new knowledge without the threat of poverty hanging over them. Mm-hmm. So the seventh reason is to partly correct the imbalance in the share of productivity gains that have been generated by new technology. So we know that most of the gains over the last 30 years have gone to capital, so wages have been relatively stagnant, while profits of our enterprises have risen enormously. Yeah. A UBI, by being paid to workers and only having part of it recovered on a sliding scale, as we'll talk about, it means that the UBI gives our low-paid workers especially a wage rise at no cost to employers. So it won't drive cost-push inflation. It will simply rectify in a small way this imbalance that has occurred in the share of wages coming out of productivity. The eighth is to, related to that, it will reduce the dislocation that is coming.
Sorry, Michael, before you go on, before you get to that next point, can we just go back to this one? And when we are, if the UBI is used to restore some of the imbalance that is occurring between wages and profit from capital, will it in any way slow down this rising gap between how much money is earned from capital, or is it just going to allow people to survive and that system will continue anyway?
That system will continue. What I believe is that there is a huge role for unions to change their focus to not just look at increasing wages, but sharing the extra productivity in time, so that we reduce the working week, right? The working week used to be 75 hours 100 years ago or so. It's down to 40. It's crept back up again. It's not fixed in stone. We should be advocating for a 4-day week or a 3-day week. We should also be advocating for more flexible hours and job share, and so as well as higher wages. So all of that productivity can be shared, but it doesn't have to come just in higher wages.
Right.
But so that's a whole other conversation.
It certainly is, and a fascinating one and a wonderful one.
Yes.
And it, in a way, it sort of takes us out of UBI and a step higher than that, and going, well, the UBI is an implementable way of making for a better society, a society where people are healthier and happier and productive. And so it's really a big rethink, isn't it?
Well, it is. And the way to think of the UBI, it's like a floor that everybody stands on. It's not a ceiling to achievement. So if you're standing on the first floor instead of the ground floor, then you're lifted up and your basic survival needs are met. It's much, much easier to turn your mind to more productive activities. And those activities are not necessarily just doing paid work. They're also, human beings have an almost infinite capacity for designing creative endeavors and pursuing them. And and doing things of social benefit and so on. So that's all the UBI is. It's a necessary requirement to refocus our society, but it's not sufficient to deliver the benefits that can be achieved. But again,
anyway, I'm so sorry I stopped you in your tracks. Let's get back to where you were. What number were we up to?
Okay, we're up to number 8, right?
Okay, let's get back to number 8.
And it will help to reduce the dislocation that is coming due to increased automation, artificial intelligence, and virtualization and other technologies. So those technologies are changing the nature of work. They're reducing a lot of what has been traditional service jobs in banking, insurance, in retail, in warehousing, transport, and so on. And it's coming at an accelerating rate. And there may be in future new jobs that evolve out of this technology, but there is a gentleman by the name of Daniel Susskind who's made a really good point that jobs may not be done by people. So even the new jobs might be done more and more by machines. So we are going to have to face this changing nature of work and employment. And it's not something we should worry about. It ought to be something that's really exciting and positive that people are being freed at last from the drudgery of these jobs. But we need a way to take us through the transition, right? And the UBI is a way to at least put that floor in to underpin people when they lose their traditional work to find their way into a new way of life without being thrown into absolute poverty. So that's number 8. Number 9, it's a point that's been raised by a guy by the name of Jeff Croker, who's written a book called Basic Income and Sovereign Money. And he's made the point that if you look at what's happened over the last 30 years or so, the middle class has, because their wages have stagnated, have replaced a lot of their spending by increasing debt, right? And so we've had this enormous debt burden growing, which is creating stress and financial pressure and so on. And what a UBI can do, it can provide debt-free money to people. So because it's being paid to you without any obligation to repay it, that can help minimize this pressure of debt that's been building both in individual lives and across the economy. And the final thing is that it actually expands the idea of democracy from the political into the economic sphere. So if we think about our vote, we say everybody should get an equal vote. That's to influence the government to act on our behalf collectively, right? Whereas the UBI puts that power directly into each person's hands to be able to vote in the market for what they want, right? So it is actually the epitome of democracy in action. And
so it's like you voting with your money, basically.
You're voting with your money.
You vote with your wallet. But if you're saying, but there's a whole percentage of the population who don't have that money to vote, they're not getting heard. That's the idea, right? So it's not
exactly. They're not. They are. If you don't have money, you are invisible to the market, so the market can never respond, right? And there's plenty of capacity out there, but the business is not going to produce what you need unless you can rock up with your vote, which is your dollar in your hand.
So there we have it. Thank you, Michael. That was our reach.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I keep jumping in and getting
no. Well, it is a conversation after all, Andrea.
Yeah, so, lovely.
So look, that's where we're up to now. And so what I would like to do is now take us through the implementation. But the first point I want to make is that we can afford a UBI. So in Australia, we've got all of the resources, the food, the materials, the energy, to provide for basic needs.
Okay, I'm going to just ask you to stop and repeat that because I think it is such an important point, right? Like I think most people, first response would be, yeah, right. Well, how are we going to pay for that?
Yeah.
We can't afford it. What are the negative financial and economic consequences going to be? So nice and slow, Michael just said, we can afford a UBI.
Yeah, in the real terms, right? Forget about money for a start. We've got the grain and the milk and the meat and the, all of the food, all of the clothing, the energy, the resources we have access to either directly or through imports after paying for the imports through our exports of minerals and so on. We as Australians have the capacity to ensure everybody's got their basic needs met: housing, clothes, food, you name it, right? And not only that, our own internal capacity for the last 20 years has been running at around 80%. So we're not even running internally at full capacity across the businesses that operate in Australia. And as for, worrying about charity food lines and, how people are going to get this stuff, well, we've got perfectly good distribution networks called shops, right? And so long as you have the money, you can turn up to a shop and that shop will give you all that you need from a basic point of view. And so what about money? Unlimited, because we create the stuff, right? And
Again, like you say that, like it's just, oh yeah, it's so, a matter of fact.
Yes.
This is not
a matter of fact.
It is a matter of fact, but most people like, okay, so I just want you to say it again is all.
Yes. So, well, it's different from a country point of view is very different to an individual. An individual has to find some way to get money, either through work or through family or as a gift or a loan, something like that. But the money itself has to first come into being. And how does it come into being? It gets created, and it gets created through both the central bank and the banks tapping on keys in their computer to make the entries that create the money. Now, that's a whole issue again of how it happens, but it happens, right?
I'm going to do another podcast just on that because I do think it's fascinating, Michael. I will talk about that. But for now, it's just the idea that what you've said before was it's unlimited.
Yes.
It's a choice how much is created.
Yes. Well, it is, but there are constraints, right? And I will come to that, right? You can't just turn money out in an endless stream, right? But
without consequence. I mean, you could, but there'd be consequences.
Right. So, but if we've got the resources, the question then is what is missing? And the simple answer is the way to get money to everybody who needs it, two things: without destroying incentive and without disrupting the economy, right? Now, the solution, in fact, is a universal basic income with a bit of a difference, right? And the difference with many of the proposals that are being suggested around the world is that we've taken an approach that the UBI should be as least disruptive to existing systems as possible. And so we've designed it so that we don't need to change the employment law or employment relations between people. We don't need to change anything about banking. We don't need to increase taxes. We don't need to increase government borrowing. We don't need to take money from other government programs, right? So that is, to some extent, a unique approach, because most other proposals, are saying, well, we'll fund the UBI through wealth taxes or through GST taxes, or we'll cut back on other welfare programs and use the money to pay UBI. We're saying all of that is unnecessary and only creates pushback from the people who are invested in the existing systems. And so we've also taken the approach then that we want to establish the two key principles for a UBI. One is that it's universal and that it's unconditional, but do it in a way that's targeted to the people who need it most. So how can something be both universal and unconditional and targeted, right? And
Michael, I can hear a bit of a knocking or something. Are you knocking something at your desk?
Oh, I don't know.
Okay, never mind, continue. It just felt like a movement. I'm hoping I'm the only person who can hear it, and maybe all of our lovely listeners are not hearing it anyway. So
I'm sorry.
How can something be universal and targeted is where you were at.
Yes, right. And the other, it's not entirely unique, but we're suggesting that it be paid with new central bank money. So just as we were talking about before, money gets created. So we're suggesting that the money should be created as a priority to ensure everybody's basic needs are met.
Yeah.
We're going to create it for all sorts of other reasons, but as a society, making sure everybody has their basic needs met has to be, in my mind at least, the priority for the creation of new money.
It seems strange, doesn't it, that this is not a universal idea? Like,
Yeah.
how come it is that we have a society that doesn't think the number one most important thing to a society is that its people are just okay, can survive on a basic level?
Because I think the whole idea has been that, you know, work is the way to get money, and people have not realized that money now is required for survival. That, as we said before, we're the only species that need money, but the systems have been designed so that not everybody can get the money they need. And I think as the realization evolves that this problem really does exist, then I think more and more people are going to come around to the idea that, yes, we do need a UBI, which is the point of our discussion, Sandra.
So, okay, back to how, so it's different because you're saying most other proposals are not saying we finance it through central bank money.
Yes. Now, Jeff Crocker is, and he's got this wonderful book called Basic Income and Sovereign Money, and that's exactly what he's talking about, and other people are too. But in many cases, there is this perception that, no, we just can't produce money. It's going to cause inflation and other things. So, and they're the problems that I do want to address. So, but what we need to do is also put it into context. The central bank have created hundreds of billions of dollars in Australia over the last couple of years to support the economy and to help people survive during the pandemic. So what we're suggesting is that the bank just continue to do that, and instead of paying it as these one-off payments, it just continues to pay it as a straight weekly amount to 20 million adults every week.
Okay, Michael, I'd like us to, because we don't have an interactive audience here to actually ask questions, I'm going to have to preempt some of what I can sort of hear people asking who aren't there, right? And one of them is, when we think back to the global financial crisis, and all that money was printed or created to prop up the bank so we didn't have a full out financial collapse. And then people around the world saw the austerity that Europe was put under in order to repay them. Well, so the negative impact of all that printing of money was austerity. And so maybe people are thinking now, okay, we've just gone through the pandemic, but that is a crisis situation. It's not an ongoing. And maybe there are going to be these terrible negative consequences that we can't yet see because we're still in the pandemic afterwards.
Well,
is that not?
Okay, well, let's say you say that the pandemic is a crisis that's passed. For 3 million people, more than 3 million people, that crisis never passes, right? So that's the 3 million people who are at any time living in poverty. And they're not the same people, right? The kids grow up, the elderly and the sick, disabled die, their carers go and find other work, unemployed people find other work. But there is a constant 12 to 14% of the population who are moving into poverty as others move out. And the fact that there is this change of people and a constant percentage just shows you that it's a system problem. It's not people's moral failings that are causing them to be, quotes, poor, right?
Right.
some involved in drugs and everything, but that's in some ways that's a response to their poverty, not a driver of their poverty. And so, yeah, we need to understand that you talked about the GFC and everything and the austerity. Again, that was a system problem, right? The problem was that the money had been spent and there's this idea we've now got to repay it. But if you think about it, if the money was created by a press of the button in the central bank, right, why should future generations curtail their spending in order to reverse those keystrokes? That's all that it is, right? In the fundamental sense, you're asking future people to reduce their spending in order to have the numbers in the central bank computer reduced. Now, that is nonsense. The real problem, right? There are two real problems in just printing the money. And one is inflation, because you get too much money chasing too few goods. And the other are labour shortages, because people have money, they decide, well, I'm not going to work. And so we've looked at how do we address those two problems, right? And the inflation risk is based on pretty simple maths, right? There are 20 million adults in Australia. If we were to pay every single one of those adults $500 a week, it would be $520 billion a year. Now, our whole economy is about 2 trillion. So 520 billion is a touch over 25%. If you're pouring 25% of extra money into the economy every single year, you are going to get inflation. So it is unsustainable. So we believe that this inflation risk can be addressed by doing two things. We can reduce the total amount of money being paid by offsetting it first in treating it as income for welfare. So just as you earn money, your welfare benefits go down. Now you'll be paid a UBI and you'll treat it as income. So you will have net better off, but the amount that the government has to pay you as a welfare benefit will be reduced. So there is money to be saved there.
But you're saying this is not the same as a poverty trap, because the amount of money that you'll be getting from the UBI is actually the poverty line. It's enough to live on, whereas welfare at the moment is not even enough to live on.
No. But we're not going to touch the welfare system, and we're not going to jeopardize people's actual entitlements under welfare. What we're going to do is pay them unconditionally a new income source that they can keep regardless of what they earn, but it will reduce their welfare benefits. So
yeah, surely, because surely
a welfare trap to an underpinning floor.
Yeah, because wouldn't, I mean, I don't know the actual numbers, but if you're getting $500 a week from the UBI and you're, what do you call it? What do you call it when you're going for unemployment benefits now? Yes. They're called New Start. Is it New Start? Whatever. Let's say.
But anyway.
Let's say that's $250 a week. Yes. Well, you probably, and then you've got to declare your income, which is $500 a week. So you actually won't be getting that New Start allowance or whatever.
Yes, but now you won't have to go and tell anybody when you're looking for work or when you've got work or how much work you've got, or you just go and live your life, right?
Yeah. And this the productivity loss of a whole bunch of people having to apply for 4 jobs a week or 8 jobs a week or whatever, that they know they're never going to get, and just in order to tick a box.
Well, it's more bureaucracy for the government, for the job service people, for the businesses who have to deal with people that are never going to get employed in that particular job just to tick a box, right? So,
yeah, that's right. That's right.
All of that. So the first thing in tackling this inflation problem is to reduce that 520 billion a bit by offsetting it through the welfare savings while improving the income and life of people who are currently on welfare.
Yeah. So when you're talking about inflation, like if you put too much money into the system, inflation, because you've got more money chasing less services, so it just pushes the prices up, right? Is this already happening with, like, is this an irrelevant question with asset prices being so high?
Yeah, well, there's two things. There's asset prices do affect homes, right, and living, but in the main, they don't have much effect on the price of normal goods and services, your food and your clothing and your transport.
Except for rent.
Except for rent, yes. It does have an impact on rent, and that is a separate problem that needs to be addressed. But in the first instance, people cannot rent if they don't have money, right? So again, the UBI is a necessary but not sufficient tool to address the problem of housing shortages, right? And I'll come back right at the very end to speak about why the UBI is not a silver bullet, right? But the key thing is, for the moment, we've decided to pay the UBI with newly created money, recognising that to just do that at $500 a week is entirely inflationary, it's not doable. Therefore, how do we address it? So first of all, we recover it through welfare. The second thing, which is the major recovery, is that we're going to take back some of the UBI out of income that you do earn. So you're going to get the $500 a week, everybody, but the more you earn, the more you'll end up paying back, and you'll pay it back at the rate of 32.26% of your earnings, right? What that means is, once you get up to earning $80,600, you are going to repay the UBI in full. So every week, the UBI, the $500 will go into your bank account, and every week, $500 will come out of your as extra tax. So you're no better off, you're no worse off. And the argument is that, well, why ever pay them? Well, the point is that circumstances change dramatically through life, and people suddenly lose their income. And in losing their income, they will not lose their UBI. So there's no delay, no need to apply, no need to tell anybody when you get a new job that you've got a new job or how much you're getting. That $500 a week is like basic income insurance for every single person. And we've seen through a pandemic that people who have been earning bloody good money can suddenly find themselves no money at all, right?
The really good thing about it is that it takes judgment out of it, doesn't it?
Yes.
So it feels to me like it allows people to be a bit more autonomous in terms of, you have a right as a human who lives in Australia to have access to some of the resources that are here, and enough just to live by, whether you work or whether you don't work. Yeah. So this thing, if it's coming into your bank account and then going out, it is still psychologically a feeling of, well, that's enough to get by. So it takes away stress and anxiety. I imagine this is what's going to be going on. And then if you lose your job, the money just happens to be there. Yeah. You got your job, let it flow, just like a little river, let it flow in and flow out, and you don't even have to look at it.
No, if from your point of view, the money going in and out is irrelevant while you are earning money, right? It's just people who are earning more than 80,000. People earning less, it's a real benefit. And so I've got a graph here, which I'd like to share the screen with you now, that I hopefully explains it in a little better form. If I can just share my screen.
I hope we've allowed multiple shares. There we go.
Okay.
So, okay, beautiful. I can see it well.
So what this graph shows is, along the bottom is gross annual income for various levels. and the vertical scale is the net income that people get. So the first thing to focus on is the blue bars. So they are the amounts of money that you net on each gross income rate. So if you look here at $8,000, earning $8,000, you don't pay any tax, you earn net $8,000. The same with $14,000, the same with $18,200. That $18,200 is the tax-free threshold. So above that, you start to pay tax. So you can see once you get up to here 69,000, the net that you are getting is under 60. That's because you're paying tax. So all those blue bars are the after-tax amount of money that you get in your pocket at each gross income level, which is along the bottom. If you look at the yellow bars, that's your UBI. And you can see down at the zero, somebody who's got no income now is getting the full UBI. Somebody who's getting $1,200, you might see there's a tiny little bit of orange. 8,000, there's a little bit more orange, and 14,000, a bit more orange. That orange is the amount of net income that you get to keep out of your blue bit. So you can see it's a bit less than the blue bit. You add the yellow and the orange together, you're way ahead of the blue bit when you're earning little money, right? And that's what I was talking about before, that it becomes an effective wage rise for low-paid people. So it's still way ahead at 18,000, at 23,000, at 31,000, even at 52,000, you're pretty well ahead. By the time you're earning 69,000, you're getting a little bit extra in your pocket, but not much. By the time you get to 80,000, you're square. So that above that, you're no better off, you're no worse off. Below that line, the lower your income, the better off you are.
Yeah,
so
great.
Incentive to work, because the person that's working 69,000, they're not just getting $500 a week in their pocket, they're getting about $1,200 in their pocket. So it's still incentive to go and work, even though you're getting the UBI. But once you get above 80,000, that incentive continues, but you're no better off.
Yeah, beautiful. I think we've got that.
I think you've got that. Okay, so the next thing I want to show is if the screen will move up. There we are. I want to just now cover off the offsets. So in summary, what we've said is that first line, we are potentially injecting $520 billion a year into the economy. But through that recovery that I just spoke about from income earners, we get back about $213 billion. In terms of welfare and combined admin savings, we're estimating about $142 billion, so that there would still be people, like I think the total is about $200 billion. So there'll still be people that we imagine will get some disability benefits and other benefits for people who are incurring higher living costs because of their health or age. So we expect some benefits to continue, but there will be a lot of savings. As the money is being spent into the economy, it's going to generate normal profits that will generate normal tax, which can be, again, saved to pay the UBI. And there's always money flowing out of the economy into existing stocks and bonds and into the international economy. We're estimating that at another 30 billion. So that leaves the net amount of money going into the economy about $100 billion. Now that, we believe, is sustainable. We're always looking for growth of at least 3%. People say ideally we'd love to see 4%. Well, 40 billion would fund 2% annual growth in a 2 trillion economy. There is ongoing technological deflation. It will be at least 2% and probably much more as the technology continues to, go further into the economy.
So we can't get into it now, Michael, but like that's a concept, that's a whole new concept again, like technology creating deflation is something I don't know about. But so anyway, we haven't got time to go into it now,
but just the point is that the amount of money that's left that could create deflation on these numbers is maybe 1%. And the Reserve Bank in any case is looking for around a 3% inflation figure. So what we're suggesting is that overall, these figures would indicate that it is doable, right?
You're right.
So what we're saying is even if the existing systems were to be completely wiped out, that there is the opportunity to not just use this money to fund a UBI, but to also maintain some additional spending for those people who have additional costs, who are disabled, and so on. So again, this analysis is simply indicative, right? It's what we believe is feasible. However, we also recognise that no one knows. We don't know, and nobody who runs an economic model really can know either, because all our economic models give, a rough idea. Maybe if they were really very good, then we wouldn't have the problems we have, because the economists would be able to tell us precisely, what interest rates we should have and what wage rates and everything else, because their models would tell them this is the outcome of doing these things. So nobody really knows what the outcome would be of injecting this amount of money in the way that we are suggesting. And so to overcome that, what we're suggesting is that...
So Michael, are we wanting to keep sharing screen, or
I will
keep that?
I'll go back to just talking now. I'll just have to find now where is...
Or do you want to just stop sharing your screen?
I'm just trying to find, there we are, stop share up there.
There we go.
Right, okay, I'll just put...
So while you're doing that, I'll just say, Michael, while you're fiddling around with your screen, part of the reason, or maybe the main reason, why economic models are not that accurately predictable, I suppose, is because economics is not a science like physics. We're dealing with unpredictable humans who make emotional decisions and decisions based on fear and stuff, right?
That's right. There's no such thing as the rational human who behaves in the way that economic models suggest they behave. And I think, there's still a lot of economists who live by their economic models, and they have a place, but I don't believe the place is to dictate necessarily how we should structure our society. They can run tests and make suggestions, but ultimately the best test is doing something and seeing what happens. Right now, that's what they really do with interest rates. Right, the Reserve Bank around the world don't just go, oh well, the target is interest rates 5% because that's going to be the number that will deliver what we want. Bang, 5%. They increase it by a tiny amount and they see what happens, and they increase it by a tiny amount and see what happens. So we're actually suggesting we take the same approach with the UBI, so that if inflation does start to kick off, well, as a result of the UBI, well, the Reserve Bank would continue to do what it always does. It'll increase interest rates a bit, right? Now, ultimately, interest rates will damp borrowing. That's going to damp economic activity. that's going to damp inflation and demand for labour. So it's the same process. Just because we're now inputting money as via a UBI isn't changing the way in which we deal with inflation and labour market imbalances. But what we need to recognise is that something fundamentally has changed, right? What it means is that we will be putting more debt-free central bank money initially to meet basic needs into the economy. And because interest rates are going up, there'll be less borrowing and there's less borrowed money going into the economy. But the economic activity will continue at full capacity. We've just changed the mix of money, the way it's going in. So we're not destroying business. We're not letting inflation run riot. We are changing the mix of the money going into the economy. We are ensuring that nobody in our society is left in poverty, and that now businesses are making more of the stuff that they need and less of the other stuff, right? But overall, our economy should be still operating at full capacity. Now, the way that we've designed it is that we think, given those income scales, about 75% of Australians will see some benefit, right? Now, up towards 80,000, the benefit's only going to be a few bucks a week, but they will get some benefit, and the less they earn, the more benefit they will have. And the rest of Australia, the other 25%, are going to be no worse off.
Yeah.
In fact, you know, if the UBI helps the economy to grow, as we suspect it will, or not suspect, it absolutely should, because it's new demand. As businesses respond, then business and the wealthy will actually do even better, because there's now more money circulating to buy the goods and services in those businesses. Yeah. So, as we said before, it also provides income insurance for anybody and everybody if they do lose their income. So the way in which we're suggesting that this be implemented with low risk is that we do something very simple, right? Just what the Reserve Bank does with interest rates, we start small, right? Mm-hmm. So instead of paying everybody $500 a week, we pay everybody $10 a week, unconditionally. So at the very start of the implementation, we established the two key principles. It's universal, everybody gets it, and it's unconditional. Doesn't matter how much money or assets you have, you are going to get $10 a week. Mm-hmm. People might think $10 a week isn't much, but it's food for a day. For somebody who's in poverty, it is food for a day in that week. And so by starting small, we can test the system with low stakes, which means that we can make sure people who should be getting it are getting it. There's not double dipping, that we've got all the admin systems in place. And then the aim is to increase it every quarter, look at the economy and say, yep, well, the world hasn't fallen apart by giving everybody $10 a week. We're going to increase it in the first quarter by another $25 a week. So now, from now on, everybody will be getting $35 a week.
So, Michael, I'm hearing that knocking again.
Oh, I don't know what's causing that.
Are you moving at all?
Maybe. Okay. Yeah, sorry.
Right.
Oh, there is a creak in my chair. Yeah.
You're no good. Okay, let's keep going, Michael. We've been going a long time, so let's.
Okay, so very quickly.
Yeah.
Every quarter, if we do that, after 5 years, we'll get to our $500 a week. So the aim is that we'll give the economy time to adjust so that the supply chain doesn't create shortages that create inflation. So we will get there after 5 years. In the process, along the way, we can check if there are, good and bad effects, and if there are inflation or labour shortages, or suddenly we find kids are sitting around in, basements playing video games and on drugs and gambling. Okay, then we'll address that as a problem, right? the more likelihood, given the global pilots that we have seen, is that there won't be any lack of motivation, that people actually will be more motivated to work, their self-esteem will be higher, there'll be improved health and well-being, less call on government services, and people will take time to educate themselves, crime will go down, there'll be less domestic violence, improved social cohesion, and improved entrepreneurship. So all that data is coming out of the pilots that we have seen. No pilot has been done across a whole country, but by starting small, that's effectively what we will be doing. We'll be running a total pilot across the whole country to say we are now giving everybody the same amount of money every week, and we can test all of these assumptions with very low risk, because at any point, if things suddenly turn terrible, which I am sure they won't, but if they were, you just stop the increase and you address the problem then.
Yeah, right. I mean, Michael, this little list of what has been seen in the pilots is remarkable. And I don't know how you could not be supportive of this, even if you're not going to benefit personally. In fact, I can't see how anybody could not benefit personally, because who enjoys living in a country where you know that there is a huge amount of anxiety and depression, homelessness, even if you live in a big, beautiful castle?
Yes.
Surely, I mean, we are all built to connect and we all have empathy. So if everybody else, if you live in a happy society, you're going to be happier. So when you say the pilots have shown there is no lack of motivation to work, we have improved self-esteem, improved health and well-being, improved education, lowered crime, reduced domestic violence, improved social cohesion, and increased entrepreneurship. Like, what more do you need to know? Really?
It's purely the concern that, people say, well, that's a pilot, that's in a particular area and it was targeted to a particular group of people. But if you spread it across the whole of society, that's not going to be the situation, right? And that's fair enough. Nobody knows, which is why we are saying if we start small,
go slow.
It's those assumptions. We can go slow, and if the worst fears happen, then they must be happening for a reason that we can potentially target and address, because ultimately you are still left with the problem that our system is designed to ensure people live in poverty, right? And it's not done out of malice. It's done with the intent to, quotes, motivate the people who can work to take on the work, right? It's the side effect that pushes people into poverty. Yeah. So we have to address this, and the UBI is the one way to do that, and to do it in the way we're suggesting, with very low risk and potentially very, very big benefits. Yeah. So that's...
Sounds amazing. I would be very interested to do a poll or a survey of how much support there is out there for this idea.
There's already been polls done in the last couple, in October last year, I think they did a poll through the Green Institute, which showed that 58% of people were in favour of the UBI, and only about 18% were against it. Others were sort of didn't know or whatever. So the overwhelming majority of people in Australia are supportive.
Yeah. There
are still large sections of people who are in power they're still in the mindset of the old economic way of thinking, that money is, you have to borrow it and pay it back, that there are all these problems that we've just been speaking about are still circulating in people's minds, and we need to address that. Yeah. And I've been through conversations like we have had, and that it will help people to change minds. And there are a huge number of benefits that we haven't spoken about. So we've identified about 50 things that will impact individuals, business, government, and society in general that a UBI will deliver, right? So it has a whole series of justifications, but on top of that, there are a whole lot of benefits that it will deliver.
Yeah. So we'll do a whole nother session just addressing and swimming in those beautiful benefits. I'm really looking forward to that one.
Yeah.
I think we're going to have to leave it today, and maybe we'll do another one where we really look at how we're going to offset potential negative consequences.
Yeah.
Is that about right?
Yeah.
I don't think that we have time to be covering all of that today. Is there anything else that you really want to cover today, though, Michael?
Well, only to say what I said before, that the UBI is not a silver bullet, right? Because it only addresses the demand side. So we still need to ensure that we've got the supply of health, education, basic housing, aged care, childcare, social support. All those things need to come into being. And we do need unions and the community to be more focused on a shorter working week, flexible hours, flexible locations, job share, higher productivity going to wages, and improved health and safety. So there's a whole lot of other things that need to be done, but the UBI is the floor. So we've really just covered today. I hope people understand that we can afford to pay a UBI out of newly created money, so long as we do target it to the people who really need it most. And we can do that by treating it as income for welfare and recovering it on a sliding scale from earned income. And we can minimise the risks and demonstrate the benefits by starting small and increasing over 5 years. So, our aim on that time scale would be to get it up and running by 2025, start $10 a week, and by 2030, everybody in Australia, every adult should be getting $500 into their bank account. So,
wow. I know personally so many people whose lives would be transformed.
Well, get the message out, Andrea. Get them on board. That's what we
hopefully. Yeah, I'm actually surprised how little most people know about UBI. I am surprised how little it is an alive concept in people's minds and an actual potential. But the timeline that you mentioned, I reckon, is a big factor in why people we can create some urgency and get people to, because it's not just something way like the next generation. It's like literally around the corner. So, Michael, thank you so much for explaining all of that. It's a lot to get your head around.
So, yes, so this one I think has been a bit longer than the other.
Yeah, a bit longer than we had planned, but there's a lot to it. So thank you, Michael. Did you not want to, just before we go, tell people how they can actually, if they love the idea, if they think it's going to be of benefit to them in society, what they can do? What can we do? Okay,
we're in the process of setting up a new website at universalbasicincome.com, but there are plenty of other websites and information on YouTube. If you just Google it, you will find all the information that you could possibly want on UBI. Some of it will be confusing and some of it will be contradictory, but it's a worldwide movement. A guy by the name of Scott Santons has wonderful resources. Jeff Crocker, also on ubi.org, I think it is. But go out and educate yourself, talk about it with your friends, post on social media and support. And certainly anybody who's interested can touch base with me. And look, let's get the conversation going. Let's get the conversation moving round and round. Thank you, Michael. See you next time. Bye. Okay. All the best. Bye-bye.